Hey, everybody, welcome to episode Podcast World. This is the main man. You know him, you love him. He's the Maven. He's the man, he's the legend. He's the one and only Steve McLaughlin, also known as Door to Door Geek. How you doing tonight, Door?
I'm doing pretty good, Doc. How about yourself?
Doing wonderful. Had a busy day today. A lot of folks wonder how we do things here in the podnutz world. And I just want to ask you guys out there, you folks out there listening, a question. Do you want to learn how to podcast like we do here at Podnuts? Well, our good buddy Steve Cherubino, who is the man behind all of this, is putting on a How to Podcast Like a Pro weekend webinar. Now, this is going to be happening on Saturday, June 25th, and following it into the next day, Sunday, June 26th. Now, Steve's going to go over everything, and I do mean everything, that he has learned about podcasting. Everything from how to get started to equipment to communication, creating shows, getting guests, broadcasting live, setting up a website, getting on iTunes, and a whole heck of a lot more. There's going to be a live question and answer sessions, so you can get all of your questions answered. Now, look, guys, you really want to get into this if you're at all interested in podcasting. You need to today, this evening, as soon as you can, go to www.howtopodcast.biz and reserve your place. That's www.howtopodcast.biz to get yourself a socket on the webinar. We'll be happy to see you there. So, has it been a busy week in the Linux world, Door?
It definitely has. I just want to add real quick. It's so easy to put on a janky podcast with poor quality and a poor website. And I gotta just let people know that definitely turns a decent percentage of people away from your podcast. You have to look professional and sound professional to be taken seriously as a broadcaster. And I do think Steve Turbino has mastered that as good as I've ever seen anyone master it. So if you want to start podcasting or any kind of audio, video recording production for the internet, I highly encourage people to go to that site, register now, learn from someone who has done a fantastic job at it.
Absolutely. And if you didn't catch that address that I gave just a little while ago, hang around to the end of the show. I'm going to give it to you again. So there's a teaser for tonight. So what's going on there, Mr. Door?
I have had a kind of busy, kind of hectic week, but at the same time, I'm always just trying to have fun and trying to learn. I fell a little bit behind on my RSS this week, so we don't have the number of stories and links to go over, but that just means we can go into a little bit better detail about each one.
Okay.
But the first thing I want to do, I wanted to really stick with the reboot aspect of going over some basic stuff.
Now, when you say reboot, for people that have missed the last couple of episodes, I think what you mean by that is that you want to not make it so much all Linux news, but also devote the beginning segment to talking about some Linux basics that people might have forgotten about or might not know. Is that correct?
Yeah, and some basic hurdles that aren't hard to get over, but if you don't have any idea of what's going on, they can really just perplex you as a new user to the degree where you might get upset. I'll say that.
Okay.
And the first thing, there's two quickies. The first thing was hidden files. On Windows, everyone knows you can view hidden files or hide hidden files. And the way you say something is hidden is you basically have to right click on the file, go to properties or file or folder, go to properties, and then check a box that says hidden.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it works in Linux at all. In Linux, it follows a naming structure. If you right click a file and go to properties, everywhere you look there is nothing that says hidden whatsoever.
Hmm.
Um, it's really simple, actually. Any file or folder that begins with a period is hidden.
Any file or
So,
folder that begins with a period is hidden that you would see in your Linux directory listing.
yep. And if you're in, there's more than a couple file browsers now that I've witnessed in Linux where if you just hit Control and H as in Henry, it will show or hide hidden files. So you can Control H, Control H, Control H, Control H, and it will show, hide, show, hide, show, hide. And that's
Hmm.
how easy it is to view or hide hidden files and folders. And if you look at your home directory, with stuff hidden, there's only like three or four, maybe six folders at the most, and they all make absolute sense to even the newest of new users. You have desktop, you have downloads, you have music, you have documents,
Hmm.
stuff like that. Then when you show the hidden files, if you're if you understand who's behind the software or the name of the software itself, most of those folders then will look um, for familiar. You'll see folders like .mozilla or .virtualbox. I mean, you'll see folders that make sense.
Hmm.
Those dot folders and dot files are typically where all of the configurations are stored. And the example I'll use is Firefox. Your user profile, all of your history, what tabs you had open the last time, all of your stored passwords, everything like that is stored in that .mozilla folder. And once you get into that folder, I'm 99.999% sure it follows the exact same structure as the Mozilla folder on a Windows computer, which
Okay.
actually means if you go into your Windows computer, copy the profile, I believe it is, folder off of that, go to your Linux computer, as long as the Firefox versions are the same, of course, you copy that profile folder down there. When you start up Firefox, you'll have everything the same. Everything will sync right up.
Hmm.
Um, in Linux, that's actually a popular thing to do, is to back up your configuration for applications so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's one of the things that I really like.
Let me ask you a question about hidden folders and files in the Linux world. Uh, the way we tend to think that the reason folders and files are hidden within Windows is that the less technically savvy users might go into them and delete them. Uh, However, it's somewhat of a given that Linux users, regardless of what distro they're using, are a little bit more technically savvy. And you would think that the need for hiding files and folders is not really that necessary. Uh, what do you have to say about that?
I would say I personally believe the reason there is hidden files is still kind of the same reason, just so you don't accidentally delete or move something. But also, um, the way I kind of think of it is it's like a curtain.
Hmm.
And when you're in the land of Oz, as long as you're just playing along and having fun, you don't need to know what's going on behind the curtain. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
as long as your system is running perfectly fine and smooth, all you're going to do is open up this folder, save this song, open up this Word document, download this I don't know, thing. But then you
Your
really don't
whatever,
have to.
basic whatever.
Right, exactly. And then you really don't need to worry about what's going on behind the curtain.
Hmm.
But if you want to know what's going on behind the curtain, they make it, in my eyes, much easier for a user to view what is hidden.
Okay.
Or as in Windows, there's actually hidden folders and then there's system protected folders or whatever. In Linux, it's just hidden.
Hmm.
And I do appreciate that part. But yeah, I mean
I
that's
can see
really the
that.
basic. That's really the basics about hidden folders and files. And I can say in my limited experience of looking around stuff, it seems like most of the hidden things are in your home folder. you know,
Okay.
because when you install applications, if it's a user level application, it will put as much about the configuration settings and options into your home folder. If it's a server level application, it usually keeps it in a different folder. Like if you install a web server, a mail server, an FTP server kind of application, those configurations are usually buried in someplace else on the computer, and usually they're not in hidden folders and files.
Hmm.
They are protected though, to where a normal user most of the time can't go in and just start playing with the files. So, 90% of the applications users are worrying about, the meat of what you want to know about backup and, save is in that home folder. It's just hidden.
Now, will Linux backup programs back up those hidden files and folders as well as the unhidden ones?
It depends on how you do it. If you just open up the file browser and hit Control A for select all, and then Control C, and then go to someplace else and just say Control V, it
Hmm.
won't.
Okay.
But if you use backup programs, virtually every single backup program I've played with also does backup the hidden files and folders. Cause what you typically do is you typically go browse starting at the root, then you go home, then I just single click on my door-to-door geek folder and hit open. So it's saving everything in that home folder.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
yeah, backup programs are typically very, very good at that. You as the end user, you have to specifically go in and say, show me hidden, copy paste.
Okay.
Okay. And the next thing I just wanted to touch on real quick, because this is going to be a much more in-depth topic, is file permissions. In Windows, we only have like two sets of permissions to the normal user, and that is, can I execute the file? Is it read only?
Hmm.
And then when you get up into more of the business class of a system, you can say, can you list directories? Can you access files? Can you create files? Can you save files? Can you delete files? And then it's on a per user basis, to where you
Okay.
have to go in and pick users independently, or if you're on a domain network, pick groups and grant or deny access. It's kind of the same thing in Linux, but initially it's more fine grained. We're on Windows XP Home and Windows 7 Home Premium. The file permissions are very basic,
Hmm.
plain. And I will say 90+% of all the issues that I've had running Linux from day one has almost always been permissions issues.
Hmm.
It kind of goes back to that security and convenience are on opposite ends of unbendable pole, and the two shall they never meet. Well, if something is secure, that means it's not going to be as convenient. Thus, most of my issues I've ever had has just been go into the file, right click, grant permissions, close it up. It works fine.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how it typically works. But next week, we'll get into a little bit more details about permissions and how they work. And I think some people will be surprised how it's actually more familiar to them than they might think.
Really.
Yeah.
Hey, Dor, I've just recently got a Android phone, and I'm getting kind of excited to start trying out different Linux apps on the on my Droid. Uh, you got anything in the news about that?
Yeah, sure. But I have a quick question. What kind of
Okay.
droid did you get?
It's a Motorola Milestone. It's an older one, but I got it at a really good rate, and it does everything that I want it to do.
Right. The Milestone, I believe, is the Droid on Verizon. Same phone, just rebranded, different
Yeah,
names.
I think it's the Droid too. Yeah.
Yes, you're right, Droid 2. That's a very solid phone, actually. And I definitely think as time goes on, you'll find yourself being pretty satisfied with that. But I got to say, I am so jealous. It makes me mad. This, honestly, Doc, I'm not going to say, made me physically ill and upset because I can't do it on my phone. And what it is it's a HTC Desire HD, which is an HTC phone, which I gotta say, I've been hearing really good stuff about HTC phones. I myself have a Motorola as well, and I've been very happy with it. Don't get me wrong. But this HTC Desire HD, someone has Ubuntu running on it natively.
Wow.
And from everything I read, it actually works. You can
Now, when you say
actually,
natively, you mean they didn't have to root the phone to get Ubuntu to run?
oh, no, 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 it's more than root. They had to root and pwn the device because, like, there is no Android running on this thing at all while
Uh,
Ubuntu is running. In the past,
right.
what people
Okay.
have been able to do, in the past, what people have been able to do is root the Android device, add a actual add a extra kernel level driver to get Android to understand ETX3 file format, then launch a um, virtual machine in the background of Android, then in the Android interface, remote into that desktop to make it
Hmm.
appear like you're running native Ubuntu, even though you're
Okay.
running two operating systems. So it couldn't have been convenient or fast. These people pwned the phone so hard they basically rewrote the entire operating system on the phone, and they made it run Ubuntu and get SMSs and make phone calls.
Hmm.
So jealous, Doc.
Now,
Because it has to be cool.
if there's any need to, could they go back the other way, get it back to the native state, so to speak?
I can safely say most of the phones I've seen, and this is a good 80 to 90% of them that I've looked into, there is ways to put a default like flash the operating system back on the phone like it's brand new from the factory.
Okay.
So it wouldn't shock me if this phone can also do the same thing.
Okay. Well, I didn't mean to break your roll there, but I really wanted to ask that question.
Oh, you're absolutely fine. I was just going to spooge it and just say, it has to be cool. It has
It
to be
has to
cool.
be.
Now,
It has to be.
the touchscreen keyboard might not be up to snuff and as smooth and as clean and look as good as a regular Android keyboard, but on this phone, I love it a lot. But I am limited to what I can do, and I'm a little limited on what can be done with it. That's a full Linux desktop where I can do anything pretty much on that phone that I could imagine. I'm just jealous.
Well, I don't see why you couldn't do it yourself, Dor, because I mean, I think you were the fella that put Linux on his kid's uh, speak and say toy, didn't you?
Well, no, I mean, everything I've done, I've had to follow online tutorials that were very well documented
Hmm.
and, bite my fingernails while I wait to see if I brick the device or not. As far as I know, the correct drivers are not available for this phone and many phones to be able to do this.
Hmm.
This is really unique what they did, and it took, no doubt in my mind, hours of work.
Do you think the people that did this wrote their own drivers?
It wouldn't shock me if they did. There are people I know. There's two guys I know at work. One of them, literally, when he comes across something that doesn't work in Linux, he actually takes the time, sits down, research, and he takes somebody else's driver and modifies it to
Hmm.
work. So it's definitely possible. It's also possible to run 50-yard dash in 5 seconds. I can't do that either. You know.
All depends on who's chasing you, or
Well, that's true.
how fast the person that's carrying the food in front of you is running.
Ex- e- Exactly. Um, I just thought it was cool because, and here's the real reason I thought it was cool. Now that guy has true 100% control over everything on that device. I don't know if you heard, Doc. Up in Michigan, I think it is, Minnesota, Wisconsin.
I haven't heard.
One of the cold places up there. There's reports in the news that state troopers are pulling over people for normal traffic stops, asking them for their driver's license, registration, and cell phone, please. And when people are giving them their cell phone, they're taking it back to their car, plugging up a device. Can't remember what the name of the device is right now, but plugging it up to a device that is basically co-sponsored and created by the wireless manufacturers. This device, you plug it in, no matter what kind of security you have on your phone, it bypasses all the security and sucks all the personal private information off of your phone and then puts it on the police computer. All your SMS, texts, history, all your phone history, a lot of stuff. There's no doubt in my mind, if that cop would take that phone and plug it up, he would get something like on his little screen, on his computer screen in his car, computer error, or something. There's no doubt in my mind it would not work.
Well, I imagine that the ACLU and the Electronics Freedoms Foundation would have their hands in this about fighting this kind of thing. That's spooky to me.
Yeah, the ACLU is completely freaking out, and it's pretty obvious why.
Right.
So
what about
hopefully,
the EFF? Are they into this any at all?
I believe they are, but to be honest, the only thing I've heard is just ACLU, because I've only seen it on like, I did see it on the news once, and my wife actually came up to me and asked me about it.
Wow. That scares the crap out of me. It really does. I mean, it wasn't until just recently that an officer could not stop you for not wearing a seatbelt. Now he
Right.
can. So now we go from that to them taking your cell phone at the time they take your license and registration and downloading all the information into the master police computer. And like I say, it just scares the crap out of me. It's really overstepping bounds, if you ask me.
I agree, and my wife was kind of asking, like, why would I be freaking out? Because that the federal government and the cell phone can already get into your phone and do this and do that. And I'm like, yes, I know that. But that's at least a controlled gateway. It's like it would be really hard for me to hack into that gateway and get access to your phone. I said, but because I know the cops have a piece of computer hardware, I know it can be duplicated or replicated by somebody with nefarious ideas, which means he can just walk around, plug up to any phone he wants, and suck everything off.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be hacked. It's going to be cracked. It's going to be reverse engineered. There's no doubt in my mind. And that's what I don't like. The fact that now I can't take my eyes off my phone.
Well, I tell you, I've said this several times, but I'll say it again. This scares the crap out of me. I liken this in my mind to mandatory urine test. Now, I have nothing to hide. If I could pass a urine test with flying colors, but I still don't think it's right that myself or anybody else for that matter should have to give up their waste matter so that somebody could try to pin something on them. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, I agree. The state was Michigan, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes where it looks like they have a picture of the device, what it looks like. But I'm sure there's more in-depth stories that go into more greater detail about this. It just made me feel queasy. And that guy I know with the Ubuntu phone has much less to worry about than me.
Yeah, I can see. Well, man, can we move on to more pleasant subjects that's not making my stomach churn?
Absolutely, Doc. This one will make your wallet happy, if that helps.
Yeah.
there's a new device that's going to be out. It's only $200. Okay, first off, let me rewind this. Asus was the company that basically invented and popularized the netbook, and they all had Linux on them. And then Windows put a little pressure on them, nudge, 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 nudge. And then they said, the experience is better with Windows. And then when Windows 7 came out, they basically got rid of all their Linux netbooks and Windows exclusively. And in my biased mind, coincidentally, shortly thereafter, netbook sales started to plummet. Yeah, that's just my goggles. That's what I see stuff. Well, Asus #1 has announced they are going to come back out with more devices running Linux and Ubuntu, which to me is good just for the price factor. It's going to be a cost savings to people. And I do think, honestly, it's been 2 years since the netbook thing started. Linux has came a long way in 2 years. It's just a simple fact of life. Linux iterates seemingly quick than Windows, because quicker in Windows, it's only once every 3 years. You get these massive updates, kind of thing. Well, the Asus EE PC X101 is what it's going to be called. It's going to be a $200 netbook, which I got to say, I really appreciate that $200 price point. It's going to be available to have on it Windows, which I'm all is fair and love and war, or MeGo Linux. Okay. MeGo Linux is a project that was heavily sponsored by Intel and Nokia. Okay. They actually both put a lot of money into it. They took two other projects that I can never remember and merged them into Mamo, and I can never remember the other one. Those two, and they combined them into MeGo because they wanted to cooperate and get this together and get it to run better. Well, our friends at Nokia hired a very high executive Microsoft employee, and then a few short months said they're going to have nothing but Windows Mobile 7 Series phone, mobile phones. So they basically dropped MeGo and acted like it's dead. And a lot of the community panicked and said, thinking it would be dead. Well, there's actually a couple other companies that picked up the ball. Intel is still the main #1 money bagger. So they are continuing the development of this Linux operating system. And I got to say, from everything I've heard, it's pretty polished. It's pretty smooth, pretty easy to use. So I'm really excited for a $200 netbook that's going to be sold here by Asus. I honestly, to be honest, I kind of like their hardware as well.
If they put Windows 7 on netbook, how much do you figure that would raise the price to?
Well, the truth be told, okay, we have to pay $100 just give or take for Windows. Manufacturers at the most have to pay $30 a copy, I'd say. And manufacturers get kickbacks. Oh, hello, Mr. Norton. Yes, I'll be happy to put your trialware on this computer. It will only cost you $5 per computer. And they do that over and over again. So there's actually no reason in my mind why the price wouldn't be the same. Because Asus gets kickbacks from companies that want their trialware on Windows computers. So it should negate or come close to negate the price difference.
I really don't see that myself. I mean, I could see exactly what you're saying, though. I mean, if it came bundled with Windows, if it had Windows installed on it, then it would come bundled with all the other crap applications. By the way, PCDecrapifier.com for you Windows users. But I would still think that the company may be greedy enough to want to keep the price high because they did put Windows on it. And hey, it comes with all these extra features. I don't know if that would be the case or not, but you say that the price would be about the same if it had Windows on it. I say it would be probably higher.
Well, let me rephrase my answer then. should be the same. It wouldn't shock me if ASUS thinks a customer will perceive a greater value that they would jack up. I don't know, but if they perceive the customer perceives a greater value in it when it has Windows on it, then I would jack the price up too if I was them.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay, well,
I don't know.
I really don't want to talk about ways that computer companies can screw us any more than they already are. So let's continue
Right.
on.
Okay, yeah, this was cool for everybody. EEEPCX 101. Go check it out.
And
Okay,
that's the one that you've got on the link in the chat room right
yep,
now? Okay.
yep. It's hopeful, I'll say. It's hopeful. And I know I've went through this like 3 times, Doc. I've done this to you a couple times. I've mentioned backups. I've said there's too much backup stuff, but I'm going to mention this one kind of thing. Well, I'm at it again, Doc. There's a tool I was actually told by, I believe, PC Freddy in the TeamSpeak chat room. Now, if you guys aren't aware what TeamSpeak is, TeamSpeak, it's what its primary use is. You get a bunch of 18-year-old Coke and Pizza kids sitting there playing Quake or whatever the latest game is, Duke Nukem Forever, and they're in a LAN party, and they have TeamSpeak up and running with hotkeys assigned so they can voice chat as they play. Well, we here in Podnutzian land, we hijacked that concept and idea, and now we have a Podnutz TeamSpeak server where at any point in time you can just jump in. You can text chat there if you want, or if you have a microphone or a webcam with a mic on it, you can actually voice chat. And it's at podnutz.instantts.net, I believe, and then the
That's
port
right.
number is 4201. Every
And
time I
if
go in
you
there,
go ahead.
I was just say, every time I go in there, I swear I learn something. The first time I was in there, where I wasn't in there for a month, I learned Obama was dead. Osama. Damn, I did it again. Sorry, Doc.
Let's go back to a point that can be edited and you say that all over again, okay?
Yeah, well, Steve ain't editing.
Oops.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. But it is, in my eyes, a really fun place. Every time I go in there, somebody teaches me something. If it's PC Freddy, Wilbur Bear, Jay Mutton, it goes on and on. Mitch, the man Mitch. I always go in there and I always learn something. And I'm typically I just have it on while I'm doing side work and just chat while I do stuff. It's a lot of fun. You guys really need to check it out.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. This application product website, it's called Sinsani. Sinsani? I'm going with Sinsani. Syncani. Syncani. I'm going with Syncani. It's www.syncany.org. I was actually pretty impressed with this application, and I'll say I was impressed enough to actually bring it up. And here's the real secret sauce why I think it's cool. Direct quote off its website. Syncany, that's what I'm with now, is an open source cloud storage and file sharing application. It allows users to back up and share certain folders of their workstations while using any kind of storage, FTP, Amazon S3, Google storage. It does allow for a strong data encryption, but here's the thing. You can back up to local folder, FTP, IMAP, Google storage, Amazon S3, Rackspace, WebDAV folders, Picasso Web albums, Windows file sharing like Samba file sharing, Box.net, and SSH, SFTP or SSH.
Wow.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to try this yet, Because my web host says I have unlimited storage and bandwidth, and I intend on testing them on that subject.
You're going to call them out big time, Hundor?
Somebody has to, yes. So I am going to download this. I am going to try it. From the screenshot, it makes it look virtually Dropbox-like, where there's a little icon up in your taskbar, and when you look at the screenshots of the folders, they take advantage of a feature in Ubuntu. In Windows, how you have the little shortcut icon in the bottom of when an icon is a shortcut?
You mean the arrow mark?
Thank you. I'm confusing myself, Doc. Okay. In the Linux world, in GNOME world, Ubuntu world, there are little icons you can put on the top right corner. I believe they're top right corner of any thing. You can right click on a folder and go there and put a little smiley face. You can right click on a picture and you can put a little padlock. You can do all kinds of stuff. This system takes advantage of that, and it puts a little green check mark in the top right corner of files and folders when they are currently backed up, and then a little blue like swirling arrows when something's in the process of being backed up. Visually, that means you know at all times whether or not something's backed up.
Wow, that's great. That's a good idea.
Yes. So I definitely got to play with it, and I definitely bow to the Podnutz TeamSpeak server for educating me on this site service.
Well, you mentioned the places that you could back up to, like Amazon S3 and Google Storage and Dropbox. There's a new kid in town, or at least it's new to me, and it's sugarsync.com. And the most recent issue of Maximum PC did a toe-to-toe comparison of Dropbox and SugarSync, and SugarSync actually came out on top. So that's something that I've been meaning to check into. I'm not giving them a plug necessarily, but I just thought I'd mention them while we were talking about places to save your files, and I do believe they're Linux compatible as well.
Honestly, it seems like a lot of these services are making sure that they're available on virtually every platform. I'll throw one more out there for you, Doc. Wala, W-U-A-L-A. It's by Lacey, the makers of those external hard drives. The only reason I mention this one is I've heard from computer security experts that like how they do encryption and how they handle security on their service. It's very Dropbox-like from everything I hear, but it only backs up to that one place. And I've always been looking for something very Dropbox-like, but had to have a flexible back end to where I could point to different places. Because here's the kicker. With SyncAny, you can back up to a local folder. So technically speaking, you can make this work with Dropbox. You can make all these folders sync to your Dropbox folder, and then you can have Dropbox sync up to the cloud. So I like flexibility.
Flexibility is good.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, and I encourage people out there, if you guys know of any tools like this that we're missing, that we know about, shoot us an email at doortodoorgeek@podnutz.com. And I believe we have a new email address, don't we, Doc?
Yeah, I do. I've got Doc Brown at podnutz.com.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, shoot us an email if you think that we're missing the boat on something.
Yes.
I always like being in the loop. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about, Doc, I had no good segue for this. I've never heard anybody mention this application ever before on any platform, and it's Linux only. Okay, it's called Bluefish.
Bluefish.
Yeah, it's at bluefish.openoffice.nl. Okay. I know there are some people with a astigmatism toward OpenOffice, I'll say, but there was some recent news. Okay, long story short, Oracle, the evil empire, stepped in, bought Sun Microsystems. They started really screwing up how OpenOffice was being handled. With that, boom, open source to the rescue. They they fork OpenOffice, which is they basically take an entire code base that was almost a year old at that time, and they copy it to their repositories, and then a bunch of people who was working with it at Oracle, formerly Sun, started working on that project. And they did get a couple corporate backers to help them out. I think Red Hat, IBM, a couple other companies jumped in and threw them some money. And they developed LibreOffice, LibreOffice. And in less than 6 months, LibreOffice had more updates to its code base than OpenOffice had for the last 3 years. So it took very, very little amount of time for LibreOffice to sprout up and grow beyond what OpenOffice used to be.
Yeah, it certainly has. I just got to say about LibreOffice, the little bit that I've used it, there has not been a Microsoft Office file that LibreOffice has not rendered absolutely on the money as to what you would expect it to see in Microsoft Office form.
Yep.
Whether it's a Word document or Excel spreadsheet, whatever, they render perfectly in Libre. Where, let's face it, with OpenOffice, you can't say that always happened.
Yeah, I definitely saw weird things once in a while in OpenOffice that I couldn't compute even what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say the only shortcoming I ever saw with LibreOffice is something that they will never be able to overcome. And that is macros. The actual back-end engine of Microsoft Office macros is Visual Basic, a patented and pended Microsoft technology. So that can exist in any other Office suite. It's lock-in. It's another way to have lock-in. With that said, everything else involved with those Office products, okay, 80% of the users who use Microsoft Office only use 20% of the functionality, okay? Only 20% of the users go above and beyond and use extra stuff, okay? With that said, document for document, compatibility speaking, not, check mark who can do what, but compatibility speaking, LibreOffice is 95% compatible with Office spreadsheets, documents, stuff like that. And I'll agree, I've had almost shockingly good success, even though I went in with a good attitude. You know what I mean? Now, here's the good news. Oracle, after floundering and very haphazardly doing nothing, saying, we're going to do stuff with OpenOffice, yeah. Months passed by, and finally, they basically gave up. And they gave ownership of OpenOffice to the Apache Foundation. Now this literally just happened. So we're really not sure what's going to happen. Some people are saying it's possible LibreOffice will get the name OpenOffice back. I understand why some people want that. I personally don't care. I'm very happy with my LibreOffice. And some people I know just don't care. They want Microsoft Office. They want Word.
So what does all this have to do with, you talk about they were floundering, keeping our sea life theme going here from floundering to bluefish. What does bluefish have to do with all of this?
Well, if Microsoft Office would once in a while come packaged with front page, let's say, tool to use to create other types of content, this tool is called Bluefish. And what it is, they actually classify it as a IDE, I believe. Bluefish is a powerful editor targeted towards programmers and web designers. Okay. It also understands scripts, which I think is really cool. It is looks like you can get it on Mac, OpenBSD, Solaris, and it says you can run it on Windows. That's news to me. Okay, I'll have to get it at work then. it's a very simple in my eyes, but effective um, editor for web pages. And I still honestly do most of my editing in Notepad or Gedit, kind of thing. I still
Hmm.
honestly do most of them in there, but I like the fact that it's very easy in this to bounce back and forth from source code to design view to preview view, uh, to be able to do stuff. I also liked its completion ability. Its ability to complete long file names, long path names, seemingly instinctively, like it knows what you're doing. Because if you save your file in a folder, and in that folder there's a subfolder, and in that subfolder there's a picture, if you start typing that in the code, it presents it to you, and you just click complete. You know,
Hmm.
I definitely found it very, very simple to use, but at the same time also very powerful. So if you have to do web editing, designing, programming of some kind, I highly encourage people to just check it out, give it a look, see if it's something that can fit your needs.
How does it handle PHP files? Can you edit PHP within Bluefish?
Yes, positively. The only reason I say it is because that's what I was editing the other day with it. So yeah, and I gotta say, code like that is typically what's harder for these editors to help you with. They can validate and say whether or not the code's correct, but they can't assist you and help you dynamically complete things all the
Hmm.
time. Where this one actually did a decent, in my eyes, I say a decent job because I have very high expectations. I
Hmm.
haven't seen another tool do this well in years. I'll say that.
Hmm.
But I also don't use a lot of the tools. So, you know.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, that's really cool. And I gotta say, I'm happy to see Open Office move on. I'm happy to see it go to a better place. Um, I just don't know what's going to happen with it. And just a super quickie, Steve C has mentioned even on a couple podcasts about how who he's talking to needs to check out Linux because it's gotten so easier. You need to check out Ubuntu because it's gotten so much easier. And they've typically said, well, my users need to run Microsoft Office kind of thing. Okay. What honestly, and I don't expect Steve C to know this because he has more
Be
important things on.
careful there, Door. Be careful.
No, 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 no. He has to make sure his cat's okay and stuff. In Ubuntu, and more poignantly, using Wine, you simply take the Office 2007 CD, you stick it in your CD drive. It will automatically launch. It will automatically run Wine. You go through setup and you have Office 2007 installed with icons right off your menu and or right on your desktop. It runs perfectly fine.
And it looks, barks, and smells just like Windows, I mean, Office on a
Yeah.
Windows machine.
I'll say, unfortunately, it does look and smell the exact same. Yes. But yeah, and it's been like this, to be honest, for years. I ran Office 2003 back in like 2005, 2006, and I was blown away at how well it just worked. Everything
Mhm.
looked exactly like it should and ran exactly like it should. And I know when 2007 came out, it was less than months that went by when they said it's now working perfectly fine. And here's the real reason why. Crossover Office. I just got to talk about this super quick. Crossover Office is a pay product by a company called Code Weavers. All this company does is it makes sure Office applications, Office style applications work good in Linux. And it's a paid product. It's only like $45 or something. Now, of course, to be legal, you really should buy Office. You should not pirate Office. Neither here there. This is the company who takes the same exact code base, takes out a little bit of the polish, I'll say, to make it super easy to do things. And they release that product, and that product is Wine. So the exact same people who are behind getting paid to make sure Office products work in Linux are the same exact people who are behind Wine. So,
So that
you
works
know,
out very well. Did Microsoft know that when they hired these people?
that's just the thing. There's no doubt in my mind they kind of don't like it. Only because, and I will say, macros do not work. I didn't think they worked. I don't think they worked. I can't remember, Doc. But don't be shocked if you install it, anyone out there, and macros don't work. But everything else works perfectly fine. Formulas in
Mhm.
Excel, custom page setups and margins, headers and footers and fonts and tables and all that stuff.
And I haven't used macros and I don't know when because I actually got kind of cautious about using uh, Microsoft Office macros because they tended to be so virus prone.
I was going to use the word evil, but I'm evil. Yes, they they used to be the root of how infections would be transmitted on Windows computers a lot. Technically now, I'm sure the percentage is much lower, but still, I believe Stuxnet was one of the ones that took advantage of macros to be able to spread and propagate faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I'm also the same way. That's why most of the time when you install Office, macros are disabled. Even
Yes.
Microsoft knows they're not great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next topic I gotta say, Doc, anyone who at all would ever even need to reinstall their own operating system, or anyone who wants to, you know, wipe a drive or anything like that, or just reinstall their own operating system, they need to know about this tool. Sorry. Barks root beer has bite. And to be honest, this is a tool a lot of computer techs actually know about, but they don't actually know about. And what I mean by that is this is G G parted or
Yeah.
GNOME partition editor. Um,
Yeah, I've
almost
used
every
Gparted several times. Yeah.
right. Well, can I ask you, when you use it, what do you do with it?
Actually, typically the way I use it is when I'm prepping a new machine and I want to have uh, an OS on one partition and another OS on another. In fact, a specific time I was installing Ubuntu on a school machine, Ubuntu and Windows. At the time, it was Windows Vista, and I used Gparted to do that.
Right. Yeah, I believe a large percentage of the Windows techs use it to resize a Windows partition. And just a super quick thing, if you try to resize a Windows partition and it fails, it's because it's fragmented. You need to defragment the drive to resize it. I know we just had some people on Podnutz that says you don't need to defrag anymore with Windows 7. I'll just say I did a fresh install of Windows 7 2 weeks ago, and it was 7% fragmented after all the updates, all the patches, and all the service packs. I believe it fragments far less than older Windows operating systems, but it can't hang with Linux. Linux doesn't
Mm-hmm.
get fragmented. But here's something I didn't know. Okay, the key features: create partition tables, like you said with Ubuntu. What I always do now, hypothetically, I have 100 gig drive. Okay, let's say I got 2 gigs of RAM in the box. First thing I do is I make a swap partition. Swap is like a page file, or what's the other
Mm-hmm.
word for it in Windows?
Yeah, temporary memory comes to mind. I know that's not what you're looking
Right.
for, but
Virtual memory.
virtual memory, yes.
Right. Or a page file. In
This is
Windows,
what
it sits
happens,
on the
by the
root.
way, guys, whenever you have two old farts doing a webcast together. Our minds go out at the same time. Virtual
Exactly.
memory. We
Um,
don't have any type of memory, virtual or otherwise.
right. And on the Windows system, it sits at the root of the C drive. In Linux, it is its own partition. Okay. So with a 100 gig drive, if it's 2 gigs of physical RAM, I make a 4 gig swap file. Right after that, for the
Mhm.
operating system, I make a 20 gig ext4 now partition for the operating system. and then I make the rest of the drive my home folder of ext4, same type of partition. And then when I go to install the operating system, I just go through their wizard and I say, "Up, I want to pick this as my swap. I want to pick this as my root or slash, and I want to pick this as my slash home." And I use gparted every time because it is utterly fully solid.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great tool. It really is. What I didn't know is one of the key features is copy and paste. What this
Copy
is
and
saying,
paste.
you
Where
can
would you use copy and paste in a partitioning project?
Right. The only thing I can think is this thing can copy and paste a partition. Like copy a partition to another drive. It's the only thing I can think of. And I literally didn't see this until today. I got to try this. If you can simply load up a parted magic, whatever it's called, because there's a billion of them, bootable Linux CD, go into gparted, click on a Windows partition and say copy, and then go to another drive and hit paste. I don't understand how it can get easier for Windows techs than that.
I would still recommend, though, that before you actually use gparted on an actual production machine or a customer's machine, that you try it on one of your bench systems at home, because as I seem to remember, unless they've changed the interface, it really wasn't all that intuitive. I mean, it worked once you figured out how to do it, but I would still recommend a practice run before you do it on something business crucial.
Right. I'll say if you ever used partition magic back in the day, it's like that. But all you got to do, and this is what I did when I first had the tool, went to youtube.com, how to gparted, and I watched the video. And I agree with Doc. Anytime you use any tool that does anything more than opening up a notepad kind of program, you always want to try on a machine that you don't care if it goes boom. Because like Clonezilla, my first time using Clonezilla, I cloned an empty drive to a full drive, and that full drive was my production. So yes, dummy computer, play around with stuff first.
It happens to the best of us, man.
It always does. And all you can do is just suck it up and say it's a learning experience. Gparted is compatible with, can understand, it can set boot flags, it can tell you about errors on the drive for drives with the formats of BTRFS, which is actually ButterFS, which if it's butter, it has to be good. EXT2, EXT3, EXT4, FAT16, FAT32, HFS, HFS Plus, Linux Swap, NTFS, Riser FS, Riser 4, UFS, and XFS. Woo!
You said that it flagged defects on the drive. What does it do? Read the smart or file or what?
No. Smart is the dumbest technology ever used. It actually, when you first load a drive, it does a preliminary scan. It understands the different formats. So hypothetically, if it's a HFS or HFS Plus, scan for those super blocks. If it's an NTFS, it will look for I can't remember what it's called, the master partition table or something. It intelligently knows how to scan and find them. And if there's errors in them, on the drive, there will be a exclamation point. You right click the partition and you can go to more information, and it will tell you the general error on it. And if a tool like check disk for Linux called FSdisk, FCKDS, like file check disk, it will actually tell you the command to run against the drive. I've had mixed success with that, I'll say that. But also it can do flags. It can make a drive bootable, make it non-bootable, mark the partition as hidden, amongst other things. It's really powerful, and I am like most techs, I typically only use it for one purpose. But it's the kind of thing I don't want people to cut short. I want to make sure people know about this tool and know what it can do. So I just wanted to mention that real quick.
And it is a free partitioning editor as well.
Yeah. And I'll say this, almost every bootable tool that you can ever use to do any kind of thing to a computer, whether it's a Cronus bootable CD, whether it's AVG bootable scanner, almost every single one of them actually use Linux in the back end, which means most of the time what it does, if it's a function, a utility, you can actually do on your Linux computer without that tool. Gparted, you can load into your Linux operating system, connect your Windows drive to your Linux box, and do the exact same thing.
You remember back in the day when boot up disk were based on, what was it, DR-DOS? Now they're based on Linux. Remember those days?
Oh, yeah. There was DR-DOS, and now the one that's actually almost popular again is FreeDOS.
FreeDOS. Yeah, the one that drives SpinRite 6. Yeah.
It does SpinRite, and it does, I think, Ultimate Boot CD and like 2 other tools that I've used. Okay, talking about file formats and accessing other stuff like that, I wanted to tell people about this tool, but I also want them to listen to the end of this description. Okay, it's a link on omg.ubuntu.uk. It's how to access Ubuntu files from within Windows.
Now, why would you want to do that?
Well, if you're dual booting, for instance, and if you want to copy, let's say, a song you downloaded from your Linux partition to your Windows partition.
Okay.
And if you're currently in Windows, Windows by default has no support for anything else except for NTFS, FAT16, FAT32.
Okay. Okay.
I'm 99% sure anything else you stick into that computer and it will say, why, this drive doesn't appear to be formatted. Would you like me to format this for you? When in actuality, it's just ignorant about the other format. Okay, there is this tool out there, and it's called ext2 Explorer. Okay, it basically in Windows opens up what appears like your normal Windows Explorer and it will allows you to browse and copy folders off of your Ubuntu drive. You cannot write to an ext partition with this tool. That's one caveat real quick. And if you try to copy big files, it will error. This is not a perfect tool. I will say that if you wanted to have a dual boot and share files between the operating systems back and forth 2 ways, you basically have to use a tool like Gparted and create another partition that's FAT32 or NTFS, because Ubuntu can read and write to both of them like a champ, and Windows can read and write to both of them like a champ. So that's typically what you got to do. You have to have like a shared area where you can put files back and forth. But if you really need to browse files and copy small files off of a Linux partition and you're in Windows, give ext2 Explorer a try. I'll just say, don't be shocked if it doesn't work smooth or clean, or maybe at all, because I've had mixed results where it won't even load.
Now, is this the first tool of its type that you've ever seen?
No, I've seen other ones in the past. When ext2 was popular, there was a couple tools on Windows that worked. They were ugly as sin, but they worked really well to copy and paste. I'm 99% sure. Copy and paste to an ext2 drive. Since the advent of ext3 and ext4, they're both journaling file systems. And it seems like now people are having issues making Windows understand and write to that format correctly. And just real quick for the people out there that don't know what a journaling file system is, basically think of it as a responsible drive. Every time you go and ask the drive to save this file, change this file, delete this file, do anything, it very quickly creates a temporary cache of those changes, and then it goes and makes those changes. It doesn't just do them right away. So technically the drive is a touch slower, okay? But here's the whole reason why. If you send that command down and that command goes down and it gets cached and then it starts to do the process and then the power goes out, okay? With older file systems, your drive would probably be corrupt. It might not even be bootable after that. But with a good journaling file system, and NTFS is one, you can then just plug in the drive and it will see that cache and it will update the rest of the update and make your drive act just fine. Okay, I see we're definitely going a little bit long here, Doc. Do we have any emails that you know of?
No, I haven't seen any this week.
Okay. I want to say I had one or two, but I can't remember them off the top of my head.
You didn't pass them over to me.
I think they were really like long time ago emails. So I'll just say there's two things out there that I'm going to put in the notes and mark them as skipped. And I'm probably going to talk at least about one of them next week. One of them is Ubuntu Dapper Drake. Alphabetically speaking, that was a long time ago. That was the first distribution I was comfortable with using, and that was Ubuntu 6.06. So it was released in June of 2006. Its end of life, its support is no more. So I feel like I really do feel like I'm getting older. The next is a set of 3 links. It's how you can download precompiled, pre-configured, ready to roll, ready to hit the street with the wheels rolling kind of thing of customized distributions to meet your specific need. And that need could be a myriad of different things.
So that's for our next show that we're going to be doing next week. Then you're going to save all this goodness for us, huh?
Well, I'm definitely going to talk about the 3 links for the custom distros. Dapper Drake I might not talk about because it just reminds me of how old I am.
Yeah, every year you get a year older, don't you? Same. You're getting old at the same rate I am, Dor.
Yep.
Well, listen, I just want to take a minute to remind you that are interested in doing things the way that our esteemed Steve C does. Want to remind you about the How to Podcast Like a Pro weekend webinar coming up the weekend of June 25th. It's a 2-day webinar. It's going to be Saturday and Sunday, the 25th and 26th of June. Go over to www.howtopodcast.biz. That's www.howtopodcast.biz. And you can reserve your space for the webinar. And we really hope to see you there. Questions and answers we'll have time for. Steve will tell you about equipment, getting guests, how to broadcast live, setting up a website. If it has to do with podcast, Steve is going to cover it. So plan on being there for that, June 25th and June 26th, Saturday and Sunday. And for Linux for the rest of us, I'm Doc Brown, a.k.a. Larry Aldrich. My buddy over there on the left is Door-to-Door Geek, Mr. Steve McLaughlin. And we'll see you next time at Linux for the rest of us. So long, everybody.